Well, good evening, CSM family. We miss you guys. Glad to kind of technically be here with you on video. Hope you guys are doing a good job connecting with your small group leaders and the rest of the people in your small groups. Tonight, we're continuing our series on following Jesus while in lockdown. And that's meant to be somewhat of a provocative title, right? How do you follow anybody or follow anything while being in a situation where you can't go anywhere? And we talked about that the first night, where really what it means to follow Jesus is to become who he would be in your position. It's largely a matter of character. It's very possible to follow Jesus on foot and not become like him. That's what Judas did. And even Peter was revealed to not really be with Jesus, to do as Jesus would do in his position, even though he followed him around for 3 years. Eugene Peterson says that prayer is how you get the following into you. And so that's what we talked about the first night, was developing a prayer life similar to Jesus. That is an obvious thing that marked who Jesus was. He would get away from crowds and go get time with God the Father, spend time in prayer. And his prayer life was notable enough to his students that they actually said, "Lord, teach us how to pray." And so the main text for that night was famously called the Lord's Prayer in Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 13. And I'm going to repeat it here because the middle of it is what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's going to be about the topic for tonight. So it goes, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name," or "celebrated be your name." It says, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." And so I asked my small group guys, how is that different than the way we normally pray? And the answer for almost all of us was, he begins with God rather than beginning with whatever is on his mind in the moment. And that's how most of us do pray. And we have to learn to put God first, especially in prayer, since prayer is such a formational thing for us. And I told the guys, be comforted. Don't be ashamed that we've been praying like that for a long time, because that's what all kids do. I mean, that's what spiritual children do. My little boy Ricky generally begins by asking for something. Not all the time, but often, right? And we can't skip steps. I mean, it's fine that we're going through these stages, but of course, we want to learn to mature. And what that looks like is becoming faithful to God, trusting him more and more. That's what we're talking about tonight. And that's what the Lord's Prayer kind of forms us to do. I think the best way to describe faithfulness in a sentence is in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, when he says when he says, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And because it's Easter weekend, today's Wednesday, but we got Good Friday coming up, and then Holy Saturday and Easter Sunday. And the reason I'm wanting to talk about faithfulness in following Jesus is because that is the major thing that apprenticeship or discipleship to Jesus does. It makes us faithful to God. It is a framework for increasing our faithfulness to God or our trust in God. And I don't think that there's many times in the biblical narratives that talks about Jesus's faithfulness to God more than right when Easter was about to happen. When he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, he knows that his arrest is close. There's going to be some torture. He's going to be nailed on the cross, dead, buried, and will rise. But he's not really looking forward to the getting dead part, right? As we would say in Georgia. And so I think that Jesus' trust in God, his knowledge that God is faithful to him, and therefore his faithfulness to God, is revealed in a few ways. One, he asks in the Garden of Gethsemane 3 times, if there's a different way of doing this, if this cup can pass from me, then let's do it that way. But what he's basically saying is, if there's any other way we can do this, I would prefer to do that. But this is where he's really, really faithful. He always ends that request by saying, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." That, to me, is the absolute core of what faithfulness is. The desire to actually know what God wants and to do it. Alice Willard says that obedience is the form that trust in God takes. And he says you can't trust your mechanic and not do what he says, right? I mean, like if you trust your mechanic, you're going to do what he says. I mean, if you trust that he knows what he's talking about and he's not trying to rip you off, and those are two big pieces of trust, right? That someone is smart and they are good. They're actually working for your good. This is why you would trust them. And he says, then following their advice, doing what they think you should do, or obedience, is how you show actual trust in someone. And so Jesus reveals that he trusts God, not just by saying your will be done rather than mine, but also the fact that he knows that he can approach God at all to bring up his reservations and being transparent about how he feels about this. If you read the Psalms, you will begin to know that God doesn't just say stop whining, right? I mean, like he is able to hear the way that we feel about things. He wants to know how we feel about things. He wants us to express it because it shows a certain amount of trust in his love for us, in his reasonableness, in his wisdom. But of course, what we want to be formed to be is someone who trusts him enough to say, not my will, but yours be done. Okay, so that's the absolute core of what faithfulness is. I had a pastor a few years ago who said something that kind of surprised me. I didn't know how I felt about it. Still don't know how I feel about it entirely, but I think it's pretty good. He says, I agree with this, you don't earn God's love. That's absolutely true. You can't earn God's love. And he says, but you do earn his trust. And I think that the idea of us being trusted by God is really kind of an incredible thing. But if you think about it, what in the world could God trust us to do? The only thing that I think he really could trust us to do is to trust him. So when he's measuring our faithfulness to him, what he's trying to figure out is how much do we trust him? He can trust us if he knows that we really, really trust him, okay? And so how do we do that? I think we just have to believe that what he wants is wiser, it is better, it's more fulfilling, it has more people in mind than we normally have. And so really what the crucial step to becoming faithful to God is learning to desire his desires even more than ours, getting in the habit of saying, not my will be done, but yours be done, right? It doesn't mean that you have no will. I mean, we should have some will, we should have some desire, but always understanding his desires as an upgrade that we would be happy to trade with, okay? Now, one of the most tiring things about the situation we're in with this lockdown situation, I think today I read in the news that it's going to be extended for a little while longer, is, part of being faithful is planning. Part of being faithful is having some idea of what's going on, preparing, and being responsible as much as you can be. And to some degree, we can't guess what the future is necessarily going to look like, but we do want to be responsible, right? And this is a big hiccup for a lot of people. This is what's causing a lot of being tired. That being said, I think I've told some of you guys this before, but I want to repeat it because I think it'll be helpful in a time like this. Years ago when I was in college as an undergraduate, I was probably a junior, and was just totally having my head in the future all the time. Wanted to know what was next, wanted to plan for the future. And so, I mean, like constantly, I remember praying, walking around like Hollingsworth or Southeastern's campus and, saying, do you want me to go to this graduate school after? What job do you want me to have after this? What state will I live in? This type of thing. And I mean, I did this a lot. And I think a lot of what faithfulness includes is being in the moment, right? Actually living in the day, like Jesus says to do in Matthew chapter 6. But I remember this one time, I felt like the Lord interrupted me and said, the more of your heart you give me now, the easier it will be for me to lead you later. So please understand this. The time you have now is not wasted. It is an absolute opportunity to do the things that will increase your confidence in God, which is your faithfulness to God, and your delight in God that will allow him to lead you later. So I'll leave you with this. Psalm 37:4 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. That is crucial to what faithfulness is. to delight yourself in the Lord is to give you the desires of your heart. What that means is, you can read it in a few different ways, but I think the way that's most helpful is to say, if you like and love God, you'll want what he wants. He will literally give you the desires that he has. And this is the absolute ground of our joy. It reduces friction between us and God. It makes us much more capable of following him quickly. And that's what discipleship is learning to follow him more quickly with less resistance, with less friction, with more skill. And so think of the things you can do to really increase your delight and trust in the Lord, to really make the most of this time, okay? So we love you guys. Please stay in touch. Always be checking the GroupMe app, our Facebook page, our Instagram page. The YouTube channel is going to have stuff frequently for you guys. And we're praying for you. We love you. We miss you. Be good. Wear your seatbelt, use hand sanitizer, and party.